Hey guys, here is the part 2 of this video. So let's move on to the next steps. The next step is to bring in the database. Okay, so regarding the database, what I have is I have the database running on a virtual machine. It has the IP address of 10.0.0.2.46. What I'm going to do is show you the virtual machine. Okay, so this is the virtual machine. It's Debian Linux running this MongoDB container. Let me do this docker ps. It shows it's running this MongoDB container on port 27017. Let me go back and let's view the database via the software called Robo3D, which is a MongoDB Explorer. So let me create a new connection. I'm going to call this node app. IP address is IP address is 10.0.0.246. I'm going to do the name of the database is demo, and you make sure it's connecting. See the IP address is incorrect. Okay, test. Okay, works. Save, connect. So the demo database right now it's empty. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this application running in this virtual machine to populate this data on the database, which is running on this virtual machine. Okay, so the next step is to configure the database connection from the Node app. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder here called config, and then create a file under that folder called db.js. So for the for the node to communicate with the MongoDB, the node requires a database driver. MongoDB provides a native database driver for NodeJS. There's also a good alternative called Mongoose, which makes it easy to connect to the database and perform the query or write operations from the node. So in this video, we're going to use Mongoose. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to install the Mongoose library here. So npm install Mongoose. So this installs Mongoose. Let's make sure it's in package.json. So Mongoose is here. So let me go back. What I'm going to do is using Mongoose, I'm going to connect to the database. So let me import Mongoose. Acquire. Now let me connect to the database. So for that, we're gonna create this variable which uses this async function to connect to the database. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a try catch, and then in the try we're gonna create this new connection. Mongoose.connect, and let me enter in the MongoDB connection params. So MongoDB demo, that's the username for the database. Password is again demo at 10.0.0.246. 246. That's where the database is running as a container, and the name of the database is demo. Right. Okay, now let's add in some params for the connection. I'm going to use new York parser is true. I'm going to use create index true. Use find and modify false. True. Okay. And after the connection, what I'm going to do is I'm going to console log, and I'm going to say MongoDB connected on host 10.0.0.246. Right, okay. This will ensure that the connection is successful. If it is not, it's throw an error. And say console.error, and then okay. And then let me export this module so I could use it from a different file, which is my app.js, which is connectdb. Okay, let me save this file. One thing I want to talk about is this async await function. I'm going to talk about it more while we write the main code here. So for now, just think it as an async function is a function which is a non-blocking function, right? So let me make one single change here. Instead of the IP address here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the output from con.connection.host. Instead of this, I'm going to use backticks. So what happens is if you use backticks, it actually prints the content of this variable, which will print the connection information it got here by running this function, right? So the important thing I want to talk about here is the async await function. It's a methodology. It's a syntax to run an asynchronous code. It makes it easier compared to the previous methods called as callback and promises. Node is asynchronous and has asynchronous and non-blocking I/O. So how we write code using callback and promises can get complicated. What async await does is it provides the syntactic sugar and the code looks like it's asynchronous, it's going in linear fashion, even though behind the scenes it is not. I will be providing more details about the async await function and the actual API endpoints, so please bear with me for now. Okay, so now that the config is complete here, we save this file and then go back to app.js and import the db.js file here. So what I'm going to do is const connectdb equals require dot config slash db, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantiate the database here. So I'm going to do connect to db, and I'm going to say connect db and then call that async function that I implemented on db.js file. So I'm going to save it here and I'm going to run npm run dev. So if the connection is successful, it's gonna log that the MongoDB is connected to the server. Let me run this. Okay, so there is an error here. It says port 3500 is in use. It says already in use, so I might not have shut down this connection properly. Hang on with me. So yes, so what happened is the previous session that I ran on port 3500 was not shut down, so it was running in the background. So I went back and killed that process. So let me run. Let me run the npm dev, and then now it says it's connected to the MongoDB. Right, so the connection is successful. So the node is now communicating with the Mongo database, and now this one logs the IP address of from the connection from the con variable. So we know it's talking to this IP address. So let me also show it from the database side that it received a connection from the node. Let me go back to my virtual machine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this command sudo iftop. It shows all the connections that the MongoDB server is listening to. So now you see this 247. So that's the server where the Node app is running. And now this connection that is sent from the Node app is received on the database server. So that's what it's showing as, it's a this stable connection from 10.0.0.247. So Mongoose pretty much sits here in this location. Right here, and it communicates with the database. So let me just connect to it, and let me call it Mongoose. So this is how the backend Node and Express uses Mongoose to communicate with the database. Okay, now that the database configuration is complete, let's look into the next piece, which is called Schema. So what is Schema? Schema is a skeleton of your data model, right? So so let me go back to this image where I show how data is stored in the database. So each line item or each object here has a structure. So each one has like a country, total cases, recovered cases, ID. So and if you look at the next object, it has the same set of items. So what Schema does is Schema creates like a template of how each object is going to store in the database. So which gives you a consistency, and it makes the operations overall consistent, stable, and moreover, it's easy for Mongoose functions to perform those CRUD operations to the database. So what we'll do here is we'll create a schema, which is a data model for how we're going to store the database, how we're going to store the data in the database. So to create this new schema, we're going to create this another folder called models, where I'm going to create a new file called COVID.js. So let me import Mongoose here. Require Mongoose, and then let me create a schema. I'll call it new Mongoose schema, and the first entry will be the name of the country, which is a type of string, and it's required. Required is true. The second item will be total cases, and the type is again, type is number here. Required is true. Next one will be covered cases. Type is again number. Required is true. And maybe also do this created at and this one will give you the current time when actually the numbers are updated. So the type will be date, and what I'm going to do is by default I'm going to give it current time. Okay, now let me export this schema, which is module.exports equals mongoose.model. Let's COVID. I'm going to use the code schema. Okay, looks good. Okay, let me run npm run dev. It starts the application. Okay guys, here is the end of part 2 of this video. See you guys on part 3.